3, 2, 1. In the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit, we are going live. Works now. All right. All right, I think we're live. I think I finally got it, guys. I hope this works. So, why am I doing this video? This is my first ever live stream, and this is actually going to be, well, first ever live stream commentary on another YouTube video. Let me put it that way. So this atheist responded to my tweet. He made a YouTube video about it. I got notifications about it last night. This tweet I posted like over a month ago, almost 2 months ago. Started getting people commenting on it. I'm like, why are people commenting on this? This was like 2 months ago. You know, the algo is just a 24-hour cycle, right? So my buddy Daniel, Darwin to Jesus, he sent me this YouTube clip to watch, this YouTube video of an atheist who put together a response addressing my tweet. Wow, I'm so honored, right? So I haven't watched this video yet. I wanted to give you my instant reaction. I just thought it would be fun. I've been wanting to do something like this anyway, and so now's the perfect time to do it, I think. Now, it's a little risky, I'll admit. I have no idea what this guy's going to say. He might completely destroy my argument. I might have to reassess my entire worldview. I might have an existential crisis. It's possible. But obviously, I don't think that's going to happen. I'm pretty confident in what I wrote. So we'll start with this video clip. But firstly, just look at if you can see the image here on my screen. Yeah, you can see a little bit on that. The tweet I posted a couple months ago was, I said, here's a new syllogism, refuting atheism. Pretty good hook for those who took that. So I said, premise 1, bestiality is wrong. Premise 2, the atheistic worldview cannot establish why bestiality is wrong. Therefore, the atheistic worldview cannot be true. Now, obviously, I was a little loose and imprecise with the formulation because it is a tweet after all, borderline a meme. However, you know, I still think that the core idea is there, and I'll explain why I believe that. And I want to hear what this guy has to say. But what I anticipate, and I haven't watched the video yet, but what I anticipate, because I've had some atheists in the comment section, people have a problem with me saying atheistic worldview. People have a problem with atheistic worldview. A lot of atheists like to say atheism just means the individual belief of God doesn't exist, that belief, right? So I'll address that. And then what does it mean for a worldview to be true, right? And so let me just upfront define that for you because I assume this individual is going to deal with that. When I say atheist, I'm referring to the traditional big titans, the founding fathers of new atheism, the Dawkins atheism, Christopher Hitchens, Sam Harris, that school of thought. And it's the full package of worldviews with the epistemology, with the empirical worldviews, what it means to be human, etc. And I'm not referring to like spiritual atheism like Buddhism, okay, like asterisks, right? I'm not talking about that here. And then what I mean by a worldview, I mean a network of beliefs that account for the fundamental questions in life. So who am I? Why am I here? What does it mean to live a good life? What's my ultimate end? What does it mean to be a human? Does God exist? What is my purpose? What is love, relationship? Like all of those fundamental questions. And so as a starting point, I want to preemptively address a critique that I anticipate. You might not do it, but I anticipate it. It's incorrect to consider a human being as having individual beliefs that are independent of everything else. We have a network of beliefs. So if you have like Johnny who has the belief of Johnny likes pizza, right? I like pizza. I like to play golf. This is Johnny. And then all of a sudden, he has the belief of God exists, and he likes pizza and he likes golf. And then if you remove the belief God exists and then put in God does not exist, like atheism injection, almost like a mental vaccine, does Johnny remain the same? Does everything else about Johnny remain identical if you just swap out the belief in God? The answer is no. The answer is no, because it affects your perception on the dignity of humans. Are we inheriting and have the potential for divinity? Do we have ontological purpose that transcends mere animal kingdom considerations? So fundamentally, I mean, I have a feeling that's what this is going to come down to. But enough of me preemptively introing this, and let me just check that this is even recording, because if you're watching this, I don't even know if you're watching this. I don't even know if this is being broadcast. This is my very first X live stream with window share. I think we're good. All right, so let's take a look. I haven't watched this yet. So, look at this, right? I've achieved different accolades in life. I never thought I would get crowned by Mr. Matt Dillahunty for potentially, introducing the stupidest argument against atheism. Now, Mr. Dillahunty has 192,000 subscribers. This video, 43,000 views, 1,364 comments. I have to say I'm honored. What was a fairly quick sleight of hand tweet, it earned me this video response of 15 minutes. So firstly, I want to say, Matt, thank you very much for taking the time to address what you consider potentially to be the stupidest argument against atheism. So here we go. Let's take a look, folks. Let's do this.
The Atheist Debates Patreon project presents the stupidest argument against atheism ever.
Nice.
Yes, it may be. And first of all, I'm already going to say that this video, I probably expect this to get demonetized. It's a sensitive subject. I'm probably going to speak in code on occasion. And it's embarrassingly stupid that I have to spend any time at all addressing this particular argument. And I suppose, to be fair, I didn't have to.
Exactly. Nice.
But it's worth showing you just how absolutely ridiculous and immoral some people are on behalf of their religion.
Ooh, I love that. Okay. Stupidest argument, fine. Okay, ridiculous. Okay. Immoral, that's an interesting claim. Interesting claim. Was me posting this tweet immoral based on the beautiful atheistic conception of morality? That higher calling in life where you just procreate and then you die and everything turns into black nothingness. Did I do something immoral? This will be very interesting.
Here's the post. I left the name there. I don't care. It says, here's a new syllogism refuting atheism. 1, bestiality is wrong. 2, the atheistic worldview cannot establish why bestiality is wrong. Therefore, the atheist worldview cannot be true. The only way the conclusion, 3, can be false is if you disagree that bestiality is wrong, 1, or if you believe that it can be established that it's objectively immoral for sex between 2 different species under the presuppositions of your godless belief system. Are there any courageous atheists who want to attempt refuting either premise? Me.
Thank you for your courage, Matt. Appreciate it.
Me, you idiot. Your argument is invalid in structure, unsound, and absolutely one of the dumbest things I've ever read. It concludes by saying, because this is what you must be able to do in order to support the viability of your own worldview. No, it's not. You are monumentally confused about absolutely every aspect of this.
I love it. We're off on a good track, some good ad hominem. Let's go.
In 20 years, this is probably the stupidest argument I've ever heard against.
Wow, man, I am really getting the act. This is better than I thought. In 20 years of this guy's got experience. He's got the beard, he's seen some things. Matt has seen some things, and I've put forward in his words the dumbest thing he's ever seen. Think about, you could watch YouTube videos about, making candy or, throwing a frisbee. There's a lot of dumb things out there, but this is the dumbest thing he's ever seen. I'm truly honored. I don't even know what to say about that.
Atheism. So first of all, Atheism is the position of not being convinced that a God exists, or in some cases of being convinced that gods don't exist. It isn't a worldview. It does not include moral decisions or moral conclusions. My morality is rooted in things like secular humanism and principles, not in whether or not there's a God. Not
Yep. Okay. So as expected, he's putting the boundaries on, for him, what atheism means. And again, if we were these programmed machines where you could extract and insert one belief and have it be independent of everything else, okay. But again, I specifically use the word atheistic worldview because if you believe that there is no God, that's going to cascade and affect how you perceive the world, how you structure everything, the things that you aim at. And so in theory, you could say, the only belief that's unique about me compared to a theist is that I just don't believe God doesn't exist. In practice, that's impossible. There's probably 5 to 10 other beliefs that cascade from not believing in God. Particularly, you have no basis for ontological human dignity or in grounding any sort of morality beyond power games and survival mechanisms.
not in whether or not I think there's a God. The atheistic worldview, he's claiming that bestiality is wrong. The atheist worldview can't establish why. Therefore, the atheistic worldview can't be true. That argument is invalid in structure. The premises don't connect. Being as charitable as possible, I would reword this perhaps as a worldview that includes moral precepts that cannot account for the immorality of bestiality is not true.
Yep.
Atheism is a worldview that includes moral precepts that cannot account for the immorality of bestiality. Therefore, atheism isn't true. That would be at least a syllogism that's valid in structure, although it's still unsound.
Correct. So I actually agree with Matt. Now, if my intent was to submit an academic paper, which I've had experience doing so, of course I would have given the super tight precision. However, this is a tweet meant to start a conversation, which I'm glad we are participating in asynchronously, perhaps involuntarily on your end. And so, correct. So when I'm saying a worldview, the implicit premise is that for a worldview to be true, or if the word true is contentious, for it to be useful, comprehensive, for it to be credible, for it to be a worldview worth adopting for yourself, that worldview should account for your fundamental intuitions and the base perceptions of reality. And so the point is, we have base perception of obvious moral truths. And this, you can swap out premise one, bestiality is wrong, with other obvious moral truths like inflicting cruelty on an innocent being is wrong, right? So you can replace premise one with anything that's your deepest moral intuition. And if your worldview, your overlaid system of beliefs and deductive reasoning and axioms, if your overlaid worldview doesn't sufficiently ground the moral intuitions, well, either A, you need to hold on to your worldview and kick out those intuitions and say my intuitions are garbage. Be a subjective moralist, relativist, nihilist, and just say, these are hallucinations, these are arbitrary patterns that I've accumulated through ancestral survival strategies. Or you hold on to the intuition, say, no, these are real. This is like the highest energetic grounding of truth, experience, and taste of reality. And therefore, I need to restructure my layered beliefs, my worldview, in a way that accounts for that. And so if your proposed worldview doesn't adequately account and explain your underlying phenomena that you directly perceive with your senses, because morality, that you perceive that through a sense, and it's an interior sense. It's not the sense of the eyes, obviously. It's not the sense of the ears. It's an interior faculty that lets you perceive morality. If your worldview denies those base perceptions, it's not a credible worldview. It cannot be true, right? That's what I say in premise 3. That worldview cannot be true. It's not useful. And so in this case, I agree with Matt. In my current formulation, yeah, it was imprecise. There's the implied premise of what a worldview is supposed to do and why the atheistic worldview does not meet the criteria of what the best worldview needs to do. So fair enough, Matt. I'm with you so far.
Because first of all, we haven't established that bestiality.
Ollie.
Advertisements. Come on, man.
What people didn't know was she was screaming
Get
for
me at
help.
the edge of my
Is immoral.
Right.
We haven't established that atheism, we have established, in fact, is not a worldview that includes moral precepts. So you cannot take something that does not make a moral pronouncement on something and say that it can't be true. It might be the case that there is no God and that it is still, in fact, immoral. Atheism doesn't have to give an accounting for morality. Essentially, this is
So we're still
the only way
disagreeing
to
about
say
the
bestiality
worldview.
is wrong is to appeal to my proposed moral source, but that's also not true. I remember in the debate that I did years ago with Cy Ten Bruggencate, he presented basically one lone argument, and that is, it is reasonable to believe that which is true. It's true that God exists, therefore it's reasonable to believe that God is true. And he rightly assumed that I would be addressing his second premise. But the first premise is also false, as somebody pointed out during the QA, and I've mentioned several times. It's reasonable to believe something is true is not the case, because something could be true, and yet you might not have good reason to believe it. It might be true that I have, a $5,000 or $10,000 sitting on my desk, but you don't have any good reason to believe that. I wish I had a good reason to believe that. I don't have a good reason to believe that. The mere fact that something is true is not what makes it reasonable. What makes it reasonable is the case for accepting that it's true. So I was wrong there. This person's doing kind of the same thing.
I don't want to get too far off the main points, but I'd have to think about this. I missed the exact formulation of the first premise. If it's reasonable to believe something is true, I hear Matt's interpretation of there exists truth, and the person may or may not have direct access to that truth through the vehicle of good reasons or not good reasons. They might not have any good reasons. So that's more about the attainability of truth for an individual rather than the existence of truth itself. Truth can exist whether there are direct reasons, directly accessible reasons to a human mind to access that truth. But on the other hand, what I thought he was going to say, that to say, truth is what's reasonable, in some sense there's a circularity there, because who defines what is reasonable? Who defines what is a good reason? It kind of kicks the can further down the road when you have discussions like that, because the whole point is we're debating about what's reasonable. Is my argument reasonable, right? Is atheism reasonable? Is theism reasonable? And then the qualifier between that is it reasonable given a starting set of axioms and beliefs? But let me not redirect too far from this.
They're saying bestiality is wrong because they want to smuggle in feelings about things and circumvent an actual logical argument. So when they say, are there any courageous atheists who want to attempt refuting either premise? First of all, I'll refute the structure of your argument. Your argument is not a valid argument. This is not up for debate or anything else. Your argument's structure is invalid. You have presented an incredibly stupid structure.
Again, I addressed this earlier. If you want to be more precise, I gave you the precise formulation. This is a tweet, not a academic dissertation with maximum precision, but thank you for participating.
That said, premise number one, bestiality is wrong or bestiality is immoral. What ends up happening is when you smuggle in something like this, you rely on manipulating people's feelings in order to try to avoid the problems with your own argument. This is the same thing that happened when Daniel, in one of our debates, tried to make a big deal about the fact that I said I wouldn't make sex between 9-year-olds, for example, illegal. What I'm willing to make a law about is more about what I think the effectiveness of a law should be and what punishment there should be. That it was not.
Sorry if y'all are listening. I don't mean to cut off this thought, but I want to address briefly, because he's partially, sensing, right, the use of feelings, right? Because obviously, right, bestiality is wrong. That's an appeal to your fundamental moral intuition, which he describes as feelings in this case, reductively. And then, yeah, of course, the rest of it, the rhetoric, I said, are there courageous atheists, right? Where are you? obviously that's a little bit of style, right? That's not a core to the logic. That's just more like, come on, let's go. Let's have courage and talk about this, because, I don't think you want to be, supporting what most people would say is immoral behavior, i.e., bestiality. So is it manipulative? So of course we disagree there. My point is that fundamental moral intuitions and your fundamental knowledge, direct perception, and this kind of exceeds the scope of what we would talk about here. That's primary. If you stack a belief system that denies your primary intuitions, that belief system is not credible. And I talk about this on my blog, drago.life, on tiers of certainty. So again, we are more certain about some of these fundamental intuitions than we are the meta layers of semantic verbal logic, right? So anyway, he's right that feelings are a part of the energy of what's happening here in my tweet, but it's not just feelings. These are core perceptions, direct perceptions of truth through the faculties of your moral conscience that is built in and designed. I know he'll dispute with all that, but I want to, for those who are trying to keep an open mind here, I want to give that feedback. All right, Matt, I am so sorry for cutting off your recording here. Let's hear what you were going to say.
Not in any way me saying that sex between 9-year-olds should be considered moral or legal, just because I was saying that I wouldn't make a law about it. Now, what's going to happen now is they're going to say, oh, you wouldn't make it illegal to have sex with sheep. Well, actually, yes. We're talking about that very thing right now. But whether or not you want to make something illegal is independent of whether or not something is immoral. The
Correct.
law isn't merely based on immorality. There are things that we consider to be immoral that we make illegal. And there are things that we make illegal,
Sure.
whether or not they're immoral.
Sure.
And there are things that we consider to be immoral that we don't make illegal, or we shouldn't, perhaps. Maybe somebody's going to start making more laws about whether or not infidelity is illegal. I know it's still on the books in some cases.
Sure, look, the law is a proxy for morality, but not every aspect of the law has morally weighty, aspects. There's certain things that are just for functional harmony and cohesiveness of a society that aren't necessarily prescriptive in a moral sense. Fair enough, right? I don't think we need to really get into laws here, but I'm sure he has a point.
Cases, but largely we've done away with laws about infidelity being illegal. So what's been asked here is for someone to justify, actually they wanted an atheist to refute either premise. Premise one, bestiality is wrong. I think it's wrong too. But it's not, I don't think it's wrong because of any atheistic position. There's nothing about atheism that says it's wrong. That's not where my morals come from.
And I do want to hear what he's going to say. I'm glad he disagrees with premise one. That's the point. Look, if my best faith take on atheism is that you would be a moral subjectivist, because what is a moral? What is a principle? A lot of the secular humanists who try to speak about these virtues, like these floating entities, you can't measure them, you can't see them in a microscope. They're pretty godlike, if you ask me. If you think you can directly perceive the virtue of justice and courage and hope and love, these are invisible things. I can't touch hope and love, right? So they're pretty in the metaphysical realm of godlike things. So as an atheist, you really have no right to pretend this extra realm of existence exists. Because by saying God doesn't exist, you're denying that whole slice of the realm. You say, no, I'm not denying the realm, I'm just denying God. Semantically, is there really a difference? Like, God can be defined, in the various different religions as encompassing different aspects of that metaphysical realm. So again, like, in my mind, if you're going to say God doesn't exist, that word God is not just Abrahamic God of the Bible. You're denying the entire layer of reality, the entire existence that has these invisible ideals and principles. And so I'll do a video on secular humanism at some point because I think some people need help thinking through that. So anyway, you know what my stance is on atheism and its implications for morality. Our friend if I may refer to him as such, maybe not yet, but we could be friends, Matt. He tries to hold on to atheism as separate from the moral source, like secular humanism. Fine, I'll entertain that so we can keep watching this video, but I do think it's wrong.
That's not what it's based on, and that's not what atheism is. My reasoning is based on something that you overlooked, and also when you go back to the Daniel Hakikachu, Michael Jones debate over child marriage, something that they both overlooked and neither mentioned. Consent. Consent is the cornerstone of
Love
everything
consent.
having to do with interpersonal relationships.
Sure.
Having to do with interactions with other thinking beings. Do you have informed, enthusiastic consent? Uncoerced consent?
I have to jump in, and I'll let him finish, but of course. So here's where atheists, this is what you have to watch out for. They leverage principles that are true, right? I mean, what he's saying about consent is a legitimate thing, relationships between thinking beings. Right? I mean, this kind of use of language, but he's borrowing that language from metaphysical frameworks that the ex ante, before the fact, not after the fact hindsight view, but before the fact view of the atheistic model wouldn't be able to account for. Because, and this gets into the hard problem of consciousness, so I don't want to defer, but what is a thinking being? What does it mean to think? From a pure materialistic perspective, and maybe Matt's not a materialist, right? But all you can say is bzz, 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 electricity being stimulated. That is thinking. You can't actually, to describe the deeper phenomenon layer is just kind of nonsense words and vibrations. But fine, thinking beings, let's say we understand what that means through an strictly atheistic worldview, which I say is materialist, etc., right? I'm shoehorning those things in. What is consent? What is consent? Okay, consent, it's wanting. I approve. I'm in a situation, I consent to it. I am approving. What does it mean to approve? It means to render good, to judge. I'm judging the situation as good, as desirable. What does it mean to desire? To want. Oh, that's a base perception, isn't it? Well, we know what want means. You don't have to redefine it or explain it. We understand what want is. Okay, but there's that deep intuition. We are using concepts that we just fundamentally know, even though we can't actually define. I mean, you could, what does it mean to want? You can use synonyms. Well, to want is to desire. To desire is to pull towards you through a mental faculty, to use your imagination to, suck in like a vortex, the object of your desire, not to self-reference, back into the subject. Like, you could try to do these things, but you hit a limit in definition. So even the word consent, right? We know what it means because we have the intuitive faculty of knowing what that means. But what do those processes of consciousness actually entail from a purely animal terms, right? Like without relying on the ex post benefit of being a conscious being yourself as a human, because that's what's happening here, is how do you speak with these terms without using the human mind? Because guess what? A turtle, a bird, elephants, they're not having conversations about consent, right? Even though some are smarter, they can train and learn behaviors, but there's no conscious questioning of purpose in life. They're not making YouTube videos debating these things. So anyway, that was longer than I wanted to say, but all that to say, consent, that's a metaphysical word, right? I just want to point that out. It's not a word in terms of atoms and molecules. It's a process of consciousness. And that's the whole point. Atheism can't really establish a coherent grounding or worth in any of these things. Because even if consent is a real thing in a materialistic framework, why should it be important? It's just animals talking to animals. Ooh, ooh, ah, ah, woof, woof. That's it. all these other layers of meaning are nice and beautiful, but a reductive framework like atheism slashes the beauty. There's no room for beauty in reductive analysis. All right, let's continue.
When you ask me, why do I think bestiality is wrong? It's because there is not a way that I can tell that you could get informed, enthusiastic, non-coerced consent from non-human animals. That's it. You can tap dance around, you can say all the other things. But what if I could get consent? Okay, keep playing your fantasy land. Consent is the key.
Back in 2022, I lost two very important people in my life.
Another.
It really wasn't until February.
Key.
The only thing I'm going to point out here is, actually, it was to be expected. He talked about Fantasyland. So this is what people critique. They say, if you anytime you get an argument of objective morals and you want to prove that everything is subjective unless God declares it, they will suggest that they're going to attack your character, your motives, things like that. Consent. Let's say he's correct with his. But we agree. Consent. Everything must be done in consent. Let's just even take the classical liberal view, which there are problems with that view as well. Where is this floating principle of consent? Where is this law? Where is this thing that you need to be bound to? We agree intuitively, we understand consent is important. But that's the whole point. It's an appeal to fundamental intuition. That's my whole point of the tweet. Everything starts with fundamental moral intuition. So, Matt, he's appealing to your fundamental intuition about the value of consent without actually establishing that as a norm. Because what's going to happen is say, oh, you're against consent? I guess you're a really bad guy. You must have fantasies. Ha ha ha. And that, again, that appeal to shame is an appeal to fundamental intuition, right? So a lot of atheists will try to appeal to shame and bypass the fact that they too rely on fundamental moral intuitions, but they don't actually have a grounding or a coherent basis for doing so.
That's why I think it's wrong. But if you only think it's wrong because you think your God is opposed to it, then you're not providing any justification for anyone. You're just making an assertion that you seem to know how your God feels about it, and that any of us should care how your God feels about it. The God of the Bible, for example, whether real or not, got a lot of things wrong.
So briefly, right? So this is an interesting point of agreement. Both sides are appealing to fundamental moral intuition, right? Like consent is important, especially in something like this, right? Now this is more than just an issue of consent, by the way, right? But that's beyond the scope. What I'm saying is God is the only coherent grounding of those moral intuitions. An atheist has no grounding from these moral intuitions. All you can say as an atheist is you can describe, there was survival mechanisms, and through an evolutionary course of social cooperation, these intuitions are in our genes, and so they continue for social cohesions at a current point in time. Like, that's the best you can do, and that doesn't prescribe anything. It just describes things, because there is no position of prescription unless you have an authoritative layer that sits on top. Without an authority, there is no prescription. It's just arbitrary power games and words. So again, it's not just that, God tells you what's wrong. You also have an intuitive understanding of what's right and wrong, and God put that in you. You were created in the image of God. You were created with human dignity that the Creator designed in you. You're not a process of arbitrary atoms clashing into atoms and chemicals mixing with chemicals.
Like slavery, like gender equality, like advocating for the slaughter of another community while keeping their virgin girls as a prize. Not only do I think that bestiality is wrong, primarily on the...
Of course, he's going to Old Testament talking points. We can handle an apologetics discussion for that later. For the purposes here, God, again, it could be a non-Christian conception of God. It could be a deist God. It can be, maybe Matt prefers Allah. I don't know. But yeah, that's again, those are all easily addressable objections for anyone who's actually open-minded. This is nothing new, but if you're not interested in knowing the truth about the Old Testament and understanding what might be problematic passages, if you don't understand the context, sure. Again, we can pretend forget the Bible, forget the version of Christianity that is in your head, Matt. We're just talking about the concept of metaphysical being itself, God, authority, a creator. That's the scope of the word God for the purpose of this discussions. No need to make it about Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus.
Foundation of consent and bodily autonomy, I actually have a preferred penalty. I think that it should probably be a misdemeanor type classification where you are sent for clinical psychiatric evaluation treatment in addition to perhaps a fine. There you go. I don't know if it's the right solution or not. I haven't spent a whole lot of time about this, to be honest. Outside of somebody posting a meme like this, it's not something that I spend a lot of time thinking about.
Oh, interesting. You admitted that it was a meme. Interesting. I appreciate that. It's a good recognition. It's good recognition. So then you understand why I took some shortcuts with the structure.
Until like somebody decides to make a law about it. And then I'm like, okay, what's the justification for this? Because I'm okay with it. I'm okay with it being illegal. I'm okay with it being viewed as immoral. So I've told you.
So fair enough. Matt's saying, why do I care about issues if they're not immediately relevant? That's fine. Just take it each day as its own. If you're keeping track of political discourse in the last 40, 50 decades, you can see a pattern. You can see a slope. It is a slippery slope. And I'm not saying we need to, that animals necessarily are going to be the next thing on the menu of policy, okay? But some people like to try to predict and anticipate the logical conclusions of worldviews. So again, if humans are just another species, then there's nothing special about humans. There's nothing morally greater about a human versus a crab. Now, humans have more abilities, right? We can do all these cool operations of consciousness, but as an atheist, you can't really establish dignity, inherent worth. That humans have inherent worth and dignity that surpasses all other creation, right? And so there are implications to that worldview. That's all I'll say about that. But you have no grounding for establishing humans as having special dignity, and that's really the problem that is at the core of the tweet I'm making. But let's continue. We got 5 more minutes of him, and I keep pausing him. So Matt, please take the floor.
That your argument is invalid in structure. It is. It is. That is invalid in structure. Then you wanted refutations of either premise. It's pointless to try to refute a premise when the argument is invalid in structure. But I did make my case for how, as an atheist, I can rely on principles of secular humanism for bodily autonomy and consent to say that bestiality is, in fact, immoral.
And by principle of secular humanism in this video, he just started with the axiom that consent is important, the floating moral precept that you intuitively understand, but again, he hasn't actually grounded through an anthropological framework or origin story.
And that I'm okay with it being illegal, and that I have at least some idealized penalty and classification of that as a misdemeanor.
Well, I'm glad you have some problems with it.
But the God of the Bible, whether is real or not, got a lot of things wrong.
Don't need to talk about the Bible in this
Exodus
discussion.
22:19 says that whoever lies with a beast shall surely be put to death.
It's a good
so,
rule.
Drago,
I think that's a
are
good
you
rule.
advocating for the death penalty for bestiality?
So, again, we're not talking about Bible here, but if the argument is that if you believe in God and if you believe in the Christian God, you therefore must want the law of the Israelites to be imposed on the lands, that's quite the stretch.
So desperate Because you can't provide evidence for your God. You can't provide sufficient evidence for any of the things that you say about your supernatural beliefs, about your God, about your holy book. You can't demonstrate that the doctrinal things are true. And so your only thing that you can do is to try to attack atheism, and you're doing it in one of the stupidest ways I've ever seen.
All right, so now it's like now he's speaking from the heart. Now he's speaking from his wounds, from the things that bother him about Christians. Probably, how someone spoke to him early on, didn't show him love. Maybe he came from a Christian household and rebelled, because that's usually the origin story for a lot of atheists, or his dad was a jerk. I understand. So here we go. I'm sure at the beginning of the video, he said that I was immoral for posting this. So I'm preparing for what seems to be an onslaught. And again, if you're just tuning in, I haven't seen this video. So I don't know. Let's see what happens next.
So if you're going to be consistent, if the Bible's penalty in Exodus 22 is death, then you should be advocating for people to be put to death whenever they're convicted of this.
Yeah, let's completely misunderstand
that's
how the Bible
penalty
works.
In Exodus. There's a different penalty in Leviticus.
Ooh.
Leviticus chapter 20, verses 15 and 16.
On animal penalties.
Is really weird.
Ooh, I'm curious, actually.
Because if a man has sex with an animal, you're to put the man to death, and you put the animal to death. Oh, by the way, it also says if a woman does this, you're to put the woman to death and the animal to death.
Oh, so you feel bad about the animal.
What's weirder? Yeah. That we're going to also kill the animal who's seemingly an innocent victim in all this.
Can animals be
innocent? Specifically include language that the same penalty applies if a woman does this. This is right down to the insanity of the Bible, holding men and women to completely different standards, different value. I've already done a video, you can go find it on my channel, about the Bible's take on women. But it's weird that we had to include, the penalty's the same. You have to kill the person. You could have just said kill the person, but nope, we had to kill the man, and we had to kill the woman, and we had to kill the animal. It's wild. Texas added a law about bestiality in 2017.
Got 2 more minutes. Hey man, I know you got issues with the Bible. The purpose of this, again, you don't even have to deal with the biblical God. You don't even need to go there. But atheists can't help themselves because, again, they have some scars and wounds from their Christian environment that they grew up in. And it's a shame. But anyway, we could deal with the Bible objections in a different video.
Which made it a felony. It was illegal prior to 2017, but only as like a misdemeanor or a public lewdness thing. In 21 states, it's a misdemeanor. In 21 states, it's a felony.
Why are we talking about the law?
In 6 states, it could be a felony or a misdemeanor, either one, depending on certain things. And it's legal in West Virginia and New Mexico. So instead of coming at atheists suggesting atheism could
call it West Virginia,
New Mexico. Maybe you should be going to West Virginia and New Mexico and asking them why they haven't outlawed it. And you should be going to all those other states and asking why they're not seeking the death penalty in these cases. So for the author of this invalid, unsound syllogism, I've given my justification, the principle of consent and bodily autonomy, to a moral objection to bestiality, as well as my proposed penalty. Here's my question for you in return.
Yes, let's hear it again.
Do you not care about the principles of consent and bodily autonomy?
Of course.
Is that not something that your religion advocates or values?
Yeah.
Do you not
especially
care
the fetus
about helping reduce the incident rate of violations of consent and bodily autonomy? Because if your only reason for opposing it is the Bible says so,
no,
the Bible also says you should kill the person and I didn't
mention the Bible anywhere.
Are you going to be lobbying for those penalties? And if so, why are you and your holy book so desperate
my holy book. I do have a holy
kill
book. Here,
the victims of sexual violation?
You don't have the
high ground here. You don't have the high ground here morally. You don't have the high ground here
intellectually.
No,
that's it.
You don't have any ground at all. Go back to the drawing board. Stop looking for gotchas and try to find some actual evidence for what you believe.
I lost your face.
Maybe maybe if you're lucky, it won't be as embarrassing as this.
Oh.
See you next time.
Next time. Nice. Hey, you know what? That had a nice rhetorical finish. I like the pizzazz. I think your viewers will appreciate that. Even though you didn't really demonstrate any of the core things that need to be demonstrated for your position to make sense. Moral high ground, I don't even know how you personally can measure a high ground. What's higher and lower? Based on the principles you decided are the floating principles that we should all be subjected to? I mean, obviously you have an issue with the Bible, and you're saying that I need to represent the Bible in the way that you've interpreted the Bible, even though I didn't even mention the Bible. We don't even have to talk about the Bible with what I said. So interesting. And then, yeah, do I need to go to West Virginia now to be consistent? Do I have to oppose every single law with my limited 24 hours in a day, some of which includes sleep? Am I morally obligated to be on the streets protesting every single law I disagree with? Don't think so. But it seems that he was upset that I posted this tweet. My fellow listeners, were you upset by this tweet? Was it bad? Was it bad that I did this? Was I offensive? Or did I provoke interesting thoughts? I hope Matt and the atheists who are sympathetic to Matt's thinking, I hope that they sense the deep moral intuition that's rustled, that's stimulated, right? Because that's the whole point. I'm trying to point you to the fact that you have direct perception of base moral truths, and that direct perception transcends and is a more solid grounding than any of the rationalizations and mental gymnastics that you could construct like a house of cards around that. And so if you are a secular humanist, you acknowledge the perception of direct moral truths, but the problem is you're stuck like someone who, like a baby who got lost in the hospital and the wrong family picked up the baby, and now the baby's trying to figure out, why doesn't my family feel like my family? Like, as a secular humanist, you have these moral truths near and dear to your heart, but you're surrounded by this atheistic framework that doesn't really give you any grounding, because from a purely atheistic perspective, you're just another animal. You're just a monkey who like makes cool sounds with his mouth. It sounds like words, and you can write, you can put cool symbols on a page. Watch out, it's a holy book. It's the holy book. So it's just animal games, dude. That's all you have as an atheist. Unless you're like a spiritual atheist, like a Buddhist. I'm not talking about you. So it must be challenging to be disintegrated with yourself, to believe in beautiful moral truths, even as Mr. Dillahunty, consent and all these great things, but have no actual grounding for establishing these other than, of course it's obvious, only a bad person would disagree with me. Oh, you don't believe in consent? You must be a bad person. Rah! Society doesn't like you. You're going to be excluded, you psychopath. That's the best an atheist can do. I've never seen a better attempt. Or, let me offer you a positive alternative. You can recognize that you have inherent human dignity. You were created in the image of God with true purpose, with a higher ultimate aim. A higher ultimate aim. To become one with God. To be fully divinized. To give glory to God. To become perfect in love. Capital love. You know that love exists. All of these proxies about consent and the good things and not being violated, like those are the outer skirts of love, the true perception of love. Love exists, okay? In the animal world, like everyone's a monkey, everyone's a crab, everyone's a snail. There's no such thing as love. It's hormones, it's a means to facilitate reproduction. There's no such thing as love. But if you intuitively can perceive and touch love, you know it's real. You secular humanist, I know you know love is real. Remember, God is love. And so, can you truly believe that God doesn't exist if you believe love exists? And that, my friends, is the point of the argument. God is love. Love exists. If you're an atheist, you have no basis for believing that love exists. So I encourage you, Matt, and people who share Matt's worldviews, reintegrate yourself. Come back. Make it all make sense. If you actually want to engage in a debate, I'm totally open. I will be respectful. I promise I will not call you an idiot or your idea is idiotic. If not, that's fine. Thank you for spending the 15 minutes to make this video. I enjoyed this. This was my raw reaction. I didn't see what you had to say. I'll be curious to hear what the feedback was. And yeah, follow my account on X if you want to see more of this, at dragodimitrov. And I have my blog. My blog will offer more of that precise formulations that the more intellectually inclined would deeply enjoy. So Matt, if you're listening to this, go to my blog, drago.life. And I think you will find some of my writings there very stimulating, maybe even persuasive. So I'll be praying for you listeners. Thanks, and God bless everyone. God bless you.